lot going on with the trees that people don't have any trees on.
I grew up in the desert, so
Oh,
I never learned
where?
the hobby
Down in California?
like after California.
Yeah, I lived for a couple of years in Southern California when I first hitchhiked out in my 30s, when I was 20, from New Hampshire to the West Coast, and the desert was my favorite place. So all the lichen that's been sitting up on the canopy from all this wind is all over the ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see that very often.
What's that?
Just that particular, everything, the ferns growing on a
licorice
tree
ferns?
Like that. Yeah.
So the licorice
just
fern,
looks
so
cool.
let's walk right over here. So
The,
trees.
yeah, we look at the roots.
Anybody know what this tree is?
That guy? Uh-uh.
Right here.
Oh, that one.
This is a vine maple. So vine maples are maples. And they like moss. And if you look, since you can't see leaves right now, you can see that these twigs look like a deer hoof. So everything splits. So if you stand back and you see that everything is a V on this plant. Makes it easy to remember. How's that for a mnemonic? Right? So these are vine maples. They always have this deer hoofs. When they're not there, it's probably because the deer have eaten them, because maples are deer's favorite food. So, and you'll be able to tell when a deer has been here, because deer, unlike us, they don't have front teeth. They can't bite. So they grab it with their molars and rip it off. So that it always looks ragged if the deer's been on it. All right. So there's tree number one. Unlike the East Coast, we won't have a dozen species of plants by the time we get Portaland. Right?
Yeah.
My niece lives in northeastern Tennessee, and so I always rent a cabin once a year. They have an October vacation, and in a city block's worth of a trail, there were 5 different species of oak trees.
Yeah. I believe it. I've been to the Carolinas a few times, and those areas are like, it's kind of wild. Coming from Oregon, like a lot of evergreens, and then they're all like deciduous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Funny doing SWAT training for that volunteering. They don't develop.
You mean for trail keepers, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh.
They film it in Montana, and there are people on the East Coast using the same standards. So when the tree size that they anticipate is not based on coastal, like giant trees like we have.
Like on the coast here, the citrus fruits.
Yeah, you see the demo videos and everything is like that big around. It's like they don't expect to ever have guidance for bigger trees be relevant, and we're like, no, come on.
Come on,
Yeah,
Fred.
like,
Let's go 3 feet.
3 feet diameter.
Different place. Yeah.
Long size.
Yeah.
So you guys know what this plant is?
Oregon green.
Oregon grape. Or as the Chinookwawa call it, it's Kaakowik. Kaakowik. Kaakowik also means yellow. Now, if I were to take out my knife and strip the bark off this would be bright yellow underneath. The root ball is full of yellow, and it's from a chemical called berberine, which naturopaths use to cure digestive disorders that Western medicine has a difficult time with. But you can also use the yellow to do something else. And nobody is wearing, yes. Nobody's wearing yellow today. Which is interesting.
It's winter. It's not a season for yellow.
So if I were to take a twig and strip off all the bark and put it in a glass of water, the water would turn bright yellow in seconds. And so if you need to make yellow, you go find Kaakowik, the yellow making plants. Boy, I thought it was muddy last Monday when I went through here. we go. Everybody know what this one is?
The moss?
No, not the moss.
The tree.
I don't know the difference in the moss.
The tree looks dead. No, it's not. It's not.
I don't
We
know.
got some guys here.
It's not dead.
No.
Maples, this is a big leaf maple tree. A young one. Well, he's not actually that young because maple trees, big leaf maple trees start out with 5 stems. You can see that if you go to, and if anybody hiked in Kanema down in Oregon City, it's a metro park. And at the upper trail, I puzzled for a long time with what these trees were, only to eventually figure out that they were brand new, young, big leaf maple trees that Metro must have planted several years ago. So that's how they start life. And this tree has so many adaptations to survival, we have no idea yet. So maple trees have a very basic bark versus acidic. So it attracts moss. Moss loves to be on this bark, just like they love to be on the vine maple bark, which you can see there.
But that's a general maple trait, like most maple trees are going to be attracting moss? Or
Yep.
is that specific to vines and...
Yeah, because the bark is basic.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And these are licorice ferns, which have their roots right inside the moss here. And none of that is hurting the tree. So people ask me this, does the moss hurt the tree? It only hurts a tree if you have a huge branch, much bigger than that, like from a big leaf maple going straight out. Like say one of those over there. It's covered with moss. You get an atmospheric river hitting an Arctic front, not that that ever happens here. Turns to ice, branch gets too heavy, cracks, falls down. So it doesn't otherwise affect the plant whatsoever. And if you could see the bark on this, you would see that it's ridged. You'll see some more. There's a little bit of it. Yeah, there you go. So, okay, maple trees. And when, of course, when it's the season, then the leaves are iconic because they're huge. Questions? And
They look like France edible.
the root is inside here. It is edible. I made the mistake. I had a very large group of people sometime recently, and there was a kid who attached himself to me, Elliot, and he was really interested in having some licorice fern root. So I cut it out, and there was too many people I wanted to move along that I had cut this much piece, and I handed it to him without thinking, and he popped the whole thing in his mouth. That is a lot of licorice. So I watched his face and he went, and then he spit it out, which is fine. But then he couldn't get the taste out of his mouth. He had to go back to the 40 people. Oh my gosh, it's a USO. An identified shining object. So he spent the rest of the hike trying to wash the taste out of his mouth.
What else can I eat?
Right. So, but normally I would just take kind of the sliver. Yeah. It doesn't taste like it. Now, this is really cool. Like when it's fell out and falling out of the tree. These are becoming more rare all the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Lettuce like them. You're gonna lose them in a mud puddle.
No, I tried.
All right, let's keep going. Everybody knows this guy? Douglas fir. That's right, Doug fir. How old do you think he is?
Hundred years.
There's nothing in this forest that's even more than 100 years old.
No.
It's all been logged.
Yeah, that's
90?
true.
Yeah, probably 70, 80, I would say. He's just a baby. He'll live to be 1,000 years old
That's
anymore.
optimistic.
That's 40 generations of humans.
If we don't get in the way.
Yeah. Right. So, you know, and they do pretty well. This guy would have shot up to the top of the canopy when he was only 10. All right. So, babies of Douglas fir trees, from their seed, from their cones, none of them will germinate anywhere where there's shade. So after there's a fire, these are the first guys that show up, or one of the first seedlings that show up and are own the canopy almost immediately. Okay. All right, so Douglas fir tree, big wrinkles, tall and straight. Okay. Here's another one, different trees all together. This is the yew tree. The yew tree, unlike all the rest of the conifers, have absolutely no smell on their leaves. Not a smell at all. Yew trees are pretty hard to find, except in a protected area like this state natural area, because people have been using it to create Taxol, which is a breast cancer drug, for decades and decades. And the Taxol is made from a fungus that grows under the bark. So you have to take out the whole tree. So you have to take out the whole tree. So you don't see it in very many places except because they're probably taken out. Now, ironically, on my Sunday program, which we go into greater depth on stuff, I had a couple chemists several months ago with me, and they had just retired, but a colleague of theirs who was still working had just finally, after decades, successfully synthesized Taxol. Now, it's still going to be years before it gets in a hospital setting, but that's a huge step. So how many trees are we up to now?
5?
4 trees.
Vine maple, Douglas fir, and yew tree.
And 2 on this side.
I don't think it's raining anymore. I think it's water. Alright, this guy, we're going to see more of these. This is the guy that we're going to see lots and lots more and more of as climate change progresses. This is a hazelnut. Beaked hazelnut. Loves the heat. Absolutely loves the heat. After the last ice age, there were 4 trees that were the primary trees. They were Douglas fir trees, they were Oregon white oak trees, red alder, we haven't met yet, and hazelnut. And these, along this Pacey trail that goes to the right when we get down to the bottom end of this trail, these are now 30 to 40 feet tall. The native populations, the Kalapuya in the valley where there's tons of these, would have always burned it down or cut it down at the end of the summer, so they would get new growth that would be sturdy sticks that they could use for making into arrows or spears or other implements. Digging, the chemists digging. Here's one of my favorite plants. Salal. S-A-L-A-L. So this is all over the beach. And like the Oregon grape, they're waxy coating, so they do pretty well so far in the climate change game. One strange thing about the Oregon grape that I've observed is that these low Oregon grapes used to be all about the same height, but now I think it's got to be all the extra CO2 in the air. Every once in a while you come upon one that's twice the height. Plants are doing very strange things once you get used to knowing what they normally look like, and then it catches your eye and go, wait a minute, that's not right.
That's weird.
It's disconcerting.
This is a great plant. This has wonderful, delicious berries at the end of the summer that are meaty. And even when they're dried up, they just taste like sweet raisins. They're just delicious. It's also a medicine plant in that if you were to get burned, you could take this leaf and chew it and put it on the burn. I was hiking at Silver Falls with some friends few years back, and I cut myself taking my pack on and off too many times. And there was no moss around at the time, so I didn't have my usual things to staunch bleeding. So I said, well, it's good for burns, let's try it. So I chewed up a leaf, put it on the cut, which was bleeding a lot, and it stopped it in under 30 seconds. It was impressive. That's in none of the books that I have, so nobody ever tried that, apparently.
Is that an invasive holly?
That's what I was thinking.
Say again?
Is that an invasive holly?
Well, all hollies, as far as
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
concerned,
that's
by
right. Yeah.
definition, invasive. Yeah. Yeah, they used to do a better job here with stewardship, but that was because of this one guy who was really a disciple, but he died several years ago. So since then, it's just not the same.
No, they're still working on the ivy.
Yeah, they're still doing ivy. There was a bunch here this morning, but nothing like the giant crowds that used to be there. What's this guy?
Doug.
Good.
Not very straight.
What's this guy? The Greek maple. Now this is a salmonberry shrub. You might ask, how can I possibly know this is a salmonberry shrub?
Thorns. They're mean.
Well, they're prickles, actually. They're not mean. I can break them off. So they're prickles because you can break them off,
Okay.
right? So you can tell that plant any time of year. Because of that one thing.
I confused it with devil's club a lot.
No, you cannot confuse that plant with devil's club. I know what devil's club looks like, and it is. You can see that from as far away as that big leaf maple there, and you know you don't want to be anywhere next to it. And what's this guy? Yew tree. No, not so hard. So this one, so these are the buds of a hazel. All right, so, and it's growing in a clump. So there's, what I've observed is every salmonberry plant that died from that ice storm a year or two ago, one of these shows up. So the ground is being occupied by a plant all the time. Different plants is what's happening. And what's that guy over there with the big leafy looking leaves? That's a cedar, western red cedar. That's right. Oh. That's why I was going to do a little recon to find the cedars on the trail if we had to go from cedar to cedar to cedar to talk. So the maples, you can actually produce maple syrup from these, though it's not like where I grew up in New Hampshire, where you have sugar maples that will, really produce sap. And the other thing, which is also changing, Becky, so they're worried about this, is that the flow of the sap that produces the maple syrup, there has to be hot and cold. It has to freeze and thaw. Freeze and thaw during the spring for it to happen. And that's becoming problematic back in New Hampshire. So a lot of the maple producers are planting even more up in the back. For all my ancestors have farmed for the last 400 years. Right, so the other thing about maples is that they have been really seriously affected by climate change. And that started up in Vancouver, BC, well over 10 years ago, and people didn't know, why are the maple trees in my yard dying? And they tried various theories over the following 10 years. And then about 2 years ago, the University of Washington teamed up with, I always forget the Forest Service group there. Was it DNR? Is that right? Department of Natural Resources? I don't know. Anyway, and they did a complete study, and they systematically eliminated every single variable until they were left with one: extreme heat. So maple trees have very thin bark, so their immune systems are just on the edge. So it's not going to take much. On the other hand, you know, because there was one summer, a couple summers ago, where all the maple leaves had a powdery mildew. And the seeds never got released. They just rotted on the tree. So if you were hiking around here during that summer, you had to have seen it because the leaves were white.
Yeah.
They were not photosynthesizing. So it was a mess. And people ask me if the trees are going to come back. And I go, well, we'll have to wait till next spring. There's no way to know. Gaia keeps her secrets. So there's a lot of interesting things going on with this tree, but it has all sorts of adaptations. You can cut this whole tree down and it will produce more shoots like these everywhere. So cutting one of these down just produces more maple trees. Over 100 years, and they were part of the last big logging of cedar trees from the early 1900s. And they'll take, you know, I often really mess with little children's minds. If there were little children here, I would have run it on any site. When you bring your grandchildren here, this stump will still be here. Now, a little toddler can't get their head wrapped around the idea of grandchildren. Yeah, it really messes them up. So, it's fun. So they've been here a long time. There was a fire on the rim in 1900, and there's still evidence of that fire. We're going to see that within a couple minutes. On the corner. Let's see. Big leaf maple. You can see the ridges really well here.
Lots of moss.
Lots of moss, and there's lichen. See the yellowish stuff here? It's some kind of crustose lichen. And of course, licorice fern.
And those aren't harmful?
No. Oh no, lichen's not harmful. No, lichen, like moss, well, lichen is a symbiotic made up of fungi and algae, or some kind of blue-green algae. And so they just, since they're non-vascular, they need a surface to get up and get the sun and get up above the ground. So it's a different strategy. They're much more primitive than the trees are. Yep, and moss is beautiful, but none of it has spore fights right now. The spore fights, sometimes I look. Well, that's for the ferns. But these guys will produce little tiny stalks with a little bud at the end, if you will. And those are how the moss reproduce. But there's none of that going on right now. They're probably all still in shock from the Arctic freeze we had.
Yeah.
This is an ossoberry. He's looking like he's recovering from the shock of 8-degree temperatures.
Yeah.
So this will become the first plant that leaves out. And when the leaves for these guys are just like an inch or less, if you pluck them and eat them, they taste exactly like cucumber peels. Exactly. So they're like a nibble, simple trail nibble. And they will produce the first flowers. They're hanging white flowers. If you guys have been hiking here a lot, you must have seen them. Did you ever smell them? You should smell them when they come out. They are unique. They're unique. I'll leave it at that.
And apparently memorable.
One smell is worth 1,000 words. So if I have a large group and they're flowering, I'll ask everybody to go smell it. And then everybody tell me what they think it smells like. And it's just amazing, the range of things I get. And then there'll be one little kid who's really wants to say what he thinks. And I go, go on, say it, say it. I know you want to. It smells like a cat litter box. Yeah, doesn't it though? Well, if you're the first plant that needs pollinating, you're attracting flies and hummingbirds and everything else that doesn't care what it smells like. Yeah. So, do you think a deer like this one?
Oh wow.
They just
Decimated.
The same one. It's almost impossible. Here's a normal big leaf maple bud. It looks like a crown. Look at it closely. It just looks like a crown. Look at it real close.
What's this one behind it?
What's that?
Smaller tree here?
This one here. It's that's. Well, the branching makes it look like a fir tree. Here's a baby fir tree. Fir trees are under a lot of stress, especially down in the Klamath Mountains. So because it's so hot and they're weakened, they've been infected by bark beetles. So he's probably no more than, I don't know, 5 years old, maybe 10 years old. Look how tall he is.
Yeah.
He just like rocket ships. Which one? I'm pretty familiar with the bush. I've volunteered for Friends of the Woods for years.
On the 400 trail, the Clackamas River Trail.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, the 400 is not that far. More like Horse Trail.
Okay. You just said Clackamas River Trail.
I did. They're different.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's River Trail. But the trails have been closed for a long time. There are a lot of baby evergreens popping up, and I picked up all of them. I don't know if they're probably things I don't want in my backyard. But I guess.
Well, the evergreens are going to be limited in number. Douglas fir tree, it's probably not a hemlock. It might be a hemlock, but we'll see. There's not a lot of options.
Some of them are Doug firs. There's Doug firs and almost more associated.
Oh. Well, it could be a grand fir. They smell.
They're the classic Christmas tree. So if it smells like Christmas.
Yeah.
It's a grand
So
fir.
this is a Douglas fir. You can't climb up to see them. You have to wait for the wind to bring them to you. So this smells. You can buy Douglas fir needles for tea at the store, or you can pick up scraps from the canopy and bring them home.
I've got a giant Doug fir that might actually be a couple hundred years old in our backyard. And
That'd be a big tree.
oh, it is very big. You don't get your arms around it.
Yeah, we have one that's over 100 years old. It was a